Oh, hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Archetype. My name's Josh Herman. Today we'll be sculpting on another character, the second character of our 12 character series um, called the Caregiver. I'm going to give you guys an update on what we did last stream, what I did off stream, and then we're going to get into it a little bit. But first, I see a couple people joining the chat. I see Roy. Welcome, Roy. I see a couple people. Let's see. Somebody says they're from India. Somebody from Turkey. From Los Angeles. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining the stream. Excited to see you all here. This is the second archetype stream of the year. So excited to have everybody here and excited to be continuing working on this series. In case you got a notification, just saw that Gnomon was streaming and have no idea who I am or no idea what this is or what you stumbled upon this, welcome. I'll give you a quick primer as to what we're going to be going through today and who I am. My name is Josh Herman, as you can see here. I am a professional artist who's worked in the entertainment industry for about a decade or more, working on collectibles, AAA games, AAA movies, all kinds of things, doing character art, character modeling, and concept art as well. I've worked as a character artist, a concept artist, a art director, creative director, and now a CCO over at Gnomon. So that's kind of a little bit about my portfolio. If you have any questions about this while I'm working, again, feel free. Somebody's asking what my PC specs are. I'm using a 2080, and I have 64 gigs of RAM on an i9 processor. Also, as you can tell, happy to answer questions about anything as you watch. Before we get started, I'm going to show you very shortly. Also, my Instagram, you're welcome to follow that. I have been posting a lot more things on Archetype, so if you want to watch some of the behind-the-scenes videos and stories like that, you're more than welcome to check that out. I'm actually going to play the one that I have right here for you in just a minute. It's about 7 minutes long. You'll get to see where we are, so we'll be playing that very, very shortly. But first, I'm going to jump into our Trello board. Part of the series is also showing the way that I work, not just the artwork stuff. I think that it's important to show a little bit of the behind the scenes. So right now we have my Trello board. If you don't know what Trello is, it's essentially a way to organize your thoughts. It's a virtual based sticky notes on a whiteboard is kind of how it works. So the character we completed first was the creator and the artist, also known as the background right here is an image from that. And so the archetype series is built on the archetype wheel, which is the 12 archetypes made by Carl Jung. So this is the 12 archetypes. We started with the artist, also sometimes known as the creator, and now we are working on the caregiver, which is over here. The caregiver's main thing that they look for is service, and they like to provide structure. So we'll talk a little bit about where we are with that character and where we're up to. Some inspirations that I've looked at with the caregiver. If you're a Riot fan, Galio is a classic caregiver who's kind of caring and protecting for the citizens around him. Baymax is another perfect one, exactly a caregiver. And Samwise Gamgee is another one. So I got a couple of these. But yeah, we're going to jump into Zbrush today primarily. Last stream we worked on our inspiration and sketches, so we're going to move this over to our sculpting and modeling phase, and we will get doing that. I see a couple questions which I'll answer after this video that we'll play, so I'll answer your question very shortly. But today we're going to be working in Zbrush sculpting and modeling. But let me play the video very shortly for you so you can see where we're up to, and then we'll run from there. Everybody, see you in a minute. All right, so for the caregiver, the first thing we're going to do, just like we did for the creators, we're going to start a sketch in Photoshop. And so obviously, that's what I got here. This is a big old kind of a round character. I wanted to portray round and strength at the same time. Just like in the creator, the artist, I used a bonsai tree as inspiration, so I did a little searching for that. I found something kind of interesting with these large round shapes. So you see me kind of sketching something there. I did a little accidental head shape on that second one, which I decided could be interesting to be a moon. And that could play into that sort of large caregiver, almost celestial vibe. So now you see me jumping straight into Zbrush. Quickly, just going to block out those proportions. You see me looking at some large power lifters there as some reference that I just popped in. And I'm just generally kind of trying to get this sort of small head, really large, bulky, almost puffy style of a round body. And so again, just blocking out those proportions using my base mesh. You can see that also I put in a base mesh of a human-sized character who's down there at the very bottom to get a little bit of scale. I thought this is a nice way to just start working to help me know roughly, how big this person is, how big this thing is, and later when I get into details, it will help a lot. So now I've got my proportions, and I'm going to start adding some subdivisions here in just a minute. You can see me playing with how the subdivisions are added, whether it smooths the mesh or not. And now you can see that ideal of those moons kind of floating around the head. So I just put some spheres in there and get it in there. I really like to just block out the character as a whole, meaning like seeing the whole character with all the pieces. Not necessarily that any of them are finished, but I like seeing the character as a whole first. That helps you think of everything at once rather than focusing on just like the head or the arms or the hands or something like that. So that's generally how I approach all these characters. And what I'm doing now is just searching for shapes. So I blocked out the large proportions, and then now I'm just kind of chiseling away. Another one of the things I used as a reference point was the fertility idols that you can kind of find in museums and stuff like that from older cultures. And often they have large kind of feminine shapes. And as a caregiver, like I think there's a lot of potentially, traditionally feminine things that we could add in there. So I'm putting that in there as like a reference point, and it's sort of some initial shapes. And I think it's interesting that kind of goes with that large, almost golem style or look, but trying to right now add a little bit of power to that. So I'm kind of liking this part of how the character's going. I'm liking how the shapes are starting to flow. You can see me start experimenting with some patterns there. Not wanting to go as far as I did, but dial it back just a little bit. And here you see me seeing maybe where those moon things come from. Maybe they come from the body. And I didn't really like that. So I duplicated it, flipped it, inflated it, and just kind of move them around so it's not an exact duplicate. Now there's a bunch of these little moon-like objects floating around their head, and I really like that. So now I'm adding a plane to the bottom, and I'm actually just going to subdivide the plane a little bit, get the human scale there set up in the right place. And this actually turns into like sort of a little small diorama where I'm going to create some mountains. So now you see me sculpting those mountains and just kind of getting everything set up. Do some final last proportion changes, and at this point I was starting to get a little bored and starting to lose track of where I was going with the design, so I wanted to do a change of pace. And what I actually did is I went into Quixel Mixer. Quixel Mixer is really simple and easy to use texturing program for free. And what you can do is you can just put all these tileable textures on an object. It's really great for environments, but since this character is large, I thought some of the large environmental scans and the displacements that go with that could be interesting. So you see me layering all those on the right, and there's kind of an interesting pattern to this character. So what I actually did was first that was a good exploration for me to see what the character could look like, and then what I did was I exported the displacement maps and the color maps of that. So I have them now if I need them. They're just tileables because that's how they were set, but now I have them if I want to use them later, if I want to displace or add that detail or explore some of that with the color map as well. And now I'm just starting to add a little bit more detail. Since I spent that time in Mixer, you can see me now coming into Zbrush and experimenting with some more line work, with some more other types of work. And kind of this is just a break from the hardcore design, like the lines and the rhythms and the focus of the object, and just spending some time on texture and what the overall character could be. And now you see me going back to that more traditional design work, and now that I've got some of those ideas in there, you see me even leaving the texture on the moons that I put there, and it adds a nice little hint of what the character could be or something it'll need to tie in with. And so now I'm bringing in the more design lines, and since this is going to be a pantheon that I'm creating, I thought that it might be a cool idea to incorporate, for a character like this, other characters in the series will not all be this type of a character, but to tie it into the creator character. The creator is a deity from the previous Archetype series, or run, I don't know, mini-series, I don't know what we'll call it, but they're all going to live in the same universe, and so I wanted to kind of bring them together. Here you see me working on the head. I had put as a joke for myself like the 6 eyes from the Celestials from Eternals, and I thought it was cool looking, and it really made sense, but obviously it's already been done. But I figured I'll kind of make this my own little take on the Eternals, Celestials, which are really cool designs and great Jack Kirby designs, and just do a little 3 series of eyes there on the forehead. And again, now I'm just going back to the character here. I'm adding more design lines, just exploring. What I like to do is I like to go through each part of the body, and as I'm rotating around, I'll work on a section, and typically a line will gesture off of the body, and when it does, what I like to do is just kind of follow it all the way around, or follow it to a point, and often I'll start seeing other lines that I've done that with, meaning more lines that are unfinished, and often you can start interpreting where the design goes when you see those things kind of at the end of their line. So right now I'm focusing on the front, and now you kind of see exactly what I was talking about going around to the back, and there's a lot of lines that were not finished because I had only done them in the front, but it gives me a good starting point for where the design lines need to begin, or should begin, if I want to keep the design I did entirely from the front. And so now I'm just kind of buttoning up the back, no pun intended, and starting to like where this is going. I'm pretty happy with how this character's going. I'm going to spend the next stream focusing on the finishing or this design and as much of the model as possible. So let's get into that. Oh, hey everybody, we're back. I heard a weird audio glitch in that, so hopefully that was just on my side. Welcome back. So this is where we are. An updated, more pushed design. I guess I'll quickly load the previous one. It was probably this one. So this is where we were before we left off. And you can see just pushing everything forward a little bit, just kind of moving in the same direction, but pushing it further, pushing it more resolved. And I like to do this back and forth quite a bit, where I can kind of see where I've gone and what I've done a lot, because I think it's a really powerful asset that Zbrush has, which is the ability to bounce back and forth. Before I get into sculpting today, I'll answer a couple of the questions. One of the questions was from YouTube, which is, how is Blender sculpting compared to Zbrush? I have only dabbled in Blender, so I can't give you like a full review on that, but I can tell you that Zbrush is definitely the industry standard when it comes to doing digital sculpting. So it's going to be more powerful. It's going to give you a lot more things, more options, more features, and it's integrated in a lot of pipelines, whereas Blender is, from its sculpting side, is not necessarily. That's not me saying that it's bad. If you are getting into 3D and you have a very low or no budget, obviously Blender is free, so try that. So it seems great, but if you want to really get into doing it professionally, I think that Zbrush is the way to go. Let's see. What marks in high school are necessary to get into Gnomon? We're not looking for especially high marks on your high school transcript, but that doesn't mean we don't look at them. High school transcripts kind of help give us an idea of your commitment as a student, so it's something we look at, but your portfolio is the number one most important thing that we look at. So don't worry if you were a bad student in high school or didn't excel or didn't get all A's. I certainly did not, and I'm a Gnomon alumni myself, so wouldn't worry about your high school transcripts too much. Quick question from Juan from YouTube. How long did it take you to understand anatomy? Several years to understand anatomy. I would say probably a solid 2 to 3 years of really committing to it and doing a lot of studies and practice and really getting into it. And it's not necessarily something where at least I feel like I have mastered it and I know every single thing about it. So it takes a while definitely to get into it. If you want to see, Ash is asking from Twitch, if you want to be a professional Zbrush artist is the way, but even if you want to make complex realistics, you can do it with Blender. Yes, you can do it with Blender, but I think Zbrush is the way if you want to be a pro, absolutely. And if you want to be really high res, realistic stuff, definitely Zbrush is the way to go. Pyramid Scheme from YouTube, will Maxon force people to try 3D Coat and other sculpting softwares? I don't know about that. I just, over the past week, I think it was released that Maxon would no longer be, I guess, honoring the perpetual license of people who have owned Zbrush for a while. So for myself, I purchased Zbrush back in 2007, I think, and I have never had to pay for it. It sounds like for a new version, because that was kind of the business model that the Pixelogic team had run with, and obviously it sounds like that might be changing. So bummer for that, absolutely. But I kind of understand it. To me, that was kind of the expected thing that Maxon would be doing. Do I think character creation is too dense of a market to get started? And do you think any kind of modeling is a good way to get started, like environment modeling? Is it a good way to get modeling? Um, Too dense of a market. Interesting. I haven't heard it phrased that way. Often, people say, is it too hard to get a job? Is it too competitive to get a job? I don't think it's too competitive to get a job. I mean, there's obviously tons and tons of work that is always happening, and that's not seemingly going to slow down. I mean, there's more shows and content and animated shows and VFX films, and the amount of VFX and everything is continuing to grow, seemingly. So it's not like I look at the entertainment sphere and say, there's going to be less character jobs or less than there were before. In fact, I would say there's more. Um, but the reason that character art jobs are often looked at as being harder or more competitive to get into isn't necessarily the denseness of the market, which is what you're saying. It's actually that the jobs themselves, there's just less of them. And what I mean by that is, if you look at your favorite game, we'll use a AAA game like an Uncharted, for example. There are probably only a handful of cinematic characters, or Last of Us, right? There's maybe 10 cinematic characters, right? In the whole game. There's a bunch of background characters and things like that, but if you think of how long it takes a person to make a character, maybe 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, but the production cycle of a game is 3, 5 years, your team doesn't need to be that big to make that many characters. So um, the team size of a character art team is just smaller. That's kind of what I'm getting at. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's more competitive in that there's more people or that the bar is higher. It's just that the amount of character art jobs is smaller because of the necessity of the team size. Um, so what that means is if you want to model characters, you have to be good, right? You have to be stand out. And that means to me, if you want to be a character artist and you want to be a character artist, really commit to it. If you just want to be a modeler and your dream is to be a character artist, or that's something that appeals to you, but you would be happy modeling anything, like it sounds like you are, then do that as well. I think it's probably there's more environment and prop modeling jobs out there, just by the necessity. So it might be easier to start in that realm, but if you really want to do characters, don't let that stop you. There's still plenty of jobs out there. How would muscle systems be incorporated into a mesh that you created? Those would be incorporated at the rigging skinning phase. So after the model was created, it would be handed off to a rigging team. I don't know how I'm going to do these fingers just yet, so I might work on those for a little while. It would be something that the rigging and skinning team would do. They would do simulations. They would do the rig itself. They would do setting up cloth movement. They would be doing muscle systems, all that fun stuff. That is not something that the character art teams or the modeling teams necessarily do. Ash from Twitch is saying, I'm studying environment art, but do you recommend to study drawing fundamentals like anatomy and perspective? I think having a 2D skill set is invaluable. I think it's something that you'll use for the rest of your life. It's something that I personally have slacked on, meaning I never really committed to it, and it's something I personally regret and try to spend more time in, but can never seem to commit to it, unfortunately. So I would personally recommend that you should take those perspective classes in anatomy and figure drawing classes, and have that tool in your arsenal. I'm going to follow up on the muscle system question. Wouldn't that change the shape of the character or lose its originality? No. The skinning and rigging teams, their job is to make sure that the characters that are sculpted look like the characters that are sculpted. So and modeled so that it won't lose any of its originality. And if you're wondering about the muscle systems, you know, every character is going to have its own muscle system or structure, regardless of how stylistic it is or realistic it is. It's all going to kind of have that same necessity to have a underlying foundation and structure. So it doesn't lose its originality there. I think I'm going to focus on this head and this kind of area here. I like what I've got going overall. I feel pretty happy about this, but I do want to kind of dial in a little bit further in the design. So I'm going to just focus on like this area. I'm going to hide this stuff down here so I'm not looking at everything. I'm just going to do a quick save and I can keep working. Do you think stylized stuff is kind of the best to not get overtaken by AI in the future? By the way, you're trying to be a weapon artist or WTV, that means. You're trying to be a weapon artist. Do I think AI is an interesting thing that keeps coming up in a lot of streams and get a lot of questions about it from students. Stylized work is obviously going to be something that's going to be created by hand for a long time still, right? There's no reason that that I see it being overtaken by AI or a job like that. But I don't think that realism necessarily is getting overtaken by AI anymore. I wouldn't see realism be overtaken by AI any more than a stylized project would. You know, there's always going to be things that need to be created because they've never existed. And AI, even though I'm sure it can be great, you know, I don't think it's necessarily going to come up with I would never expect it to be a hands-off process for an artist. You know, I mean, I've heard many of these arguments or concerns before with scanning, photogrammetry, Photoshop, photo bashing, photo texturing, you know, using a base mesh, not using a base mesh, everything that comes along that is a new tool that speeds up the workflow of artists seems to be put fear in a lot of artists that it's going to eliminate their job or remove their jobs. And I think that probably comes from the transitions that had happened in the animation industry, where 2D basically went away for a long time. It started to have sort of a renaissance, but where 2D went away for a really long time, and basically 3D animation became the only thing in town. I don't necessarily see that happening, not in that way with this type of stuff. So I would not personally be worried about that. Ash is saying, yeah, you know, like the Master Chief armor is considered realistic, but you still have to somebody make it. Exactly. You think I could make the hips a bit more or less thick so it's more masculine and muscly? I actually like the hips being more feminine. That's kind of an intentional choice. Right now I'm going to start exploring some color, potentially. So I'll do that. Ventura is saying there's so many questions you can ask. Feel free to ask as many questions as you want. I might not answer them all right away, so I can zone in on the art for a little while, but feel free to ask them and I'll try to queue them up. Somebody from YouTube, Tanupli. I don't know how to say your name. I apologize. Hey Josh, one weird question. Why do you hate working with color? I don't know the answer to why you hate working with color. It's a good question, though. I would imagine if you have any fears that I have had about color, it is very similar to me. My hesitation to texturing, my hesitation, it was actually several things, and I guess I'll kind of talk about it all at the same time. Struggles that I had early in my career when sculpting, when doing design, was color and doing detail work like alphas on a model. And also initially getting started in sculpting, I had some real troubles with, I gotta put on Camtasia, sorry, one second, I need to do my screen recorder. With sculpting and not allowing myself to make mistakes honestly, I think that's probably what it really kind of came down to, was having a big fear that whatever I was doing was going to suck, and that the first marks that I put on the virtual page sucked, right? And that the first color I put down, the first block out that I put down sucked. The first marks I would make to make a sculpt didn't look good. The first alpha I would draw on didn't work, and I would immediately undo, and I would be in this place where I would make a mark and I would continuously undo, and I would be afraid that what I was going to be doing wasn't going to be working. I'm just going to hit record for this in a second. Maybe that's what you're feeling. Maybe it's not what you're feeling, right? But that for me was a big thing, and what I kind of ended up doing to get over that was basically doing some work for myself, where I put a challenge, and I said, you know what, I'm not going to hit the undo key. I'm not going to hit the undo key. I'm not going to use the smooth brush to make sure that everything is perfect whenever I work on it. You know, I'm not going to do all that stuff, and I'm going to work in a way that makes me feel somewhat uncomfortable, but I'm going to push through that. So right now what I'm doing is I'm actually going to explore some color, so maybe this will be a good journey for you to follow. But what I'm going to do, I'll show everything here. This is the whole character. It's a little high res. It's 15 million, so I'm going to go down a resolution. And right now I'm going to explore just a block out of color, right? I don't really have anything, you know, set up. You know, I think it's just, I'm not really sure what this is going to look like, so we're going to start from the very beginning. You did see in the recap video that, you know, I did explore some brick and some texture and some stuff like that, but that really wasn't what it was. If you haven't seen the recap video, you can go ahead and check it out on my Instagram. You can follow that. It's about 7 minutes long, so feel free to watch that if you want. But what I'm going to do is I'm basically creating a shape right now, and I'm just going to start filling this with color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, just pick my color, a color, and I'm going to just pick something kind of in the middle that's not crazy saturated, that's not too dark, it's not too light, and I'm going to just pick something to start with. Do I stream or do I do it for Gnomon? I stream for myself, but primarily my streaming is done for Gnomon. I'm also going to show this stuff, and at this point I'll show this little part of the diorama. None of this is going to be colored in what I choose for the creator, but having, or sorry, the caregiver, but having this as like a starting point will be nice. I do also kind of want to tie it into what I did for the creator, which looks like this. So there's sort of this palish green. I would like it to sort of have the a similar callback to this. So maybe some of these browns, maybe some of this palish green, but it's going to be much larger, and I want it to probably have some sort of textures or vegetation or almost like a golem kind of a vibe to it. So I think just looking at this almost as my own reference sheet here, we'll probably do something in the greenish vein. And this is really just going to be a block out for color. I'm not going to be super concerned about yellowish green. So we'll start here. If you're afraid of color, this is how you start. You go in, you just put a big color in there. So I'm going to do color fill object. This is much brighter than I wanted, and it seems like it's using a different shader than I want. Because if I change the shader, it's not changing. I'm going to go back to my flat color, color, fill object. Now it's black. Oh, I have a mask on, so I need to actually undo all that. Color, fill object. Okay. Now when I switch my material, it will go to the material that I want, and now we have kind of a color. What character do you find inspiring to sculpt in the movie Avatar? In the movie Avatar, what would be, what was the Ornoctrix or something, like the big winged one that Jake Sully rides? That to me is an interesting one. I guess that's one I would probably think is cool. I'm going to go into here. I'm going to change my standard brush to just have RGB. That means I'm just going to be painting. And if I hit C, I will color pick and I can paint. I'm also going to go to my smooth brush. I'm going to turn off RGB because you can blur the color when you smooth, and I don't want that. So now I can just smooth the model and I can paint. If I hit C, I will color pick. If I hit V on the left, it will switch these colors and I can easily paint those colors depending on what I'm wanting to paint. So let's get some of this going. So I'm just going to block in something here. I don't know if this is actually almost certainly not the yellow that I'll be using. And as I blocked this out, I don't think that I like this little neck collar thing, so I'm going to keep working on that. Oops. Roughly how many polygons does a production mesh have? That's really hard to say because it's going to depend on the project, the renderer, the character, it's going to depend. It's often meshes will still be pretty heavy, but if it's being offline rendered, you can also rely on things like displacements and other texturing methods to kind of help guide that along or push it a little further or make it look a little better. So it's hard to say. In case you aren't aware, you can't see or remove the logo right below me. This stream, by the way, is sponsored by Lenovo. Lenovo is sponsoring a bunch of our streams, so thank you to our sponsors for making this and many of our other streams possible. Very excited to have them back as a sponsor, and they're actually sponsoring several of our streams now, so it's awesome to work with a good partner. Sorry for not knowing my work, but you saw Groot in my portfolio. Did I do the character for it? I did. I did do the concept art for Groot in the first Guardians of the Galaxy, and then I did some concept work for Guardians 2 as well. All right, I'm going to just do some big sweeping gestures that kind of will follow the form, and we'll see if we get anything interesting. As part of that, I'm going to change the focal shift so that rather than it feeling like an airbrush with a soft edge, I can make it feel much harder, and that's a lot easier for me to do. Color picking that yellow so that I can kind of dial in these shapes a little bit faster. It just makes it so that it's nice and easy to block out these colors. And this is kind of just color blocking. Somebody before was saying that they were afraid or they struggle with color. It's very normal. Color is difficult. Color is extremely difficult. And I'm definitely not a master of it, but I'll do my best. So right now I'm kind of looking for like a color A and a color B. There's some stuff I can do to change these colors to mask some of this stuff off. I don't want it to feel too much like a checkerboard, which is what I'm concerned about. What I mean by that is I don't want this shape and size of a color block to be the same size and shape of another one. One from YouTube asks, do you think it is hard to land your first character artist paid work? I don't think it's hard if you really commit to your portfolio and are able to get your work out there. It's all about your portfolio. So I'm going to be sculpting at the same time. I don't like this yellow that I picked. So what I'm going to attempt to do, I'll show you a thing you can do to change the colors. So you go to masking on the right. You can go mask by, there's all these masks. I'm going to turn off this one. I'm going to do mask by color. I'm going to do mask by saturation. And you'll see that now it has masked that. You can also try a mask by intensity or mask by polypaint. You'll see what it's attempting to do there. So there's all these different types of masks you can do. So intensity seems to be working. I'm going to invert that. And I'm going to try to change the color. Something a bit more orange maybe. Color, fill object. So I kind of like this one a little bit more. It's also a good way if you want to isolate another object, so I can isolate this part of the mask, hit Control H to hide that, and now I'll pick something more extreme so you can see, but now you can fill the opposite version of that. I have the mask on. There we go. So now I can continue. I'm probably going to get a darker color in here. So I'm going to just color pick this. I'm just going to get a medium gray because I'm using a matte cap, which does not respond to light, meaning if I go to straight black and I paint in this, you'll see that it goes complete to silhouette. That means that there is no light actually hitting this object. So that whenever you're painting and you're using a matte cap, you actually need to use shades of gray to get the darkness that you want. If you use standard materials like the sketch shade or down here the standard materials, the skin shade, you'll see the colors change pretty drastically, and at this point you can use a black, and even though it's dark, it does have reflections to it. It does have a specular value. All right, go back to our matte cap, choose that dark shade of gray. Going to go to our masking. I just want to add this little area here to be dark. So I'm going to go mask by intensity, and I'm just going to paint that in there. Cool. Now I can start creating these shapes, and this is basically me trying to think in values of 1, 2, and 3. So I have my 1, which is my white. I have my 2, which is this orange, and I have my 3, which is the black. So I want to add some, bits of shadowing, of detail, of information to this, of contrast to this. But I don't necessarily want to go crazy, so I'm really just trying to work in those 3 levels to begin with, of 1, 2, and 3. Giving this character sort of a little smile. They are the caregiver, so I don't want them to necessarily feel like, angry. But I don't want them to also be super, I don't know what the right word I'm looking for is. I don't want it to be angry, but I don't want them to be like a pushover either, so. All right. It could be interesting to kind of integrate some striping or something. I don't want it to feel like it's, like I was saying before, a checkerboard. So I want it to feel like it's mostly this color. Another thing we could do to try to quickly get some just base level of stuff is you can mask by AO. So if I hit mask by AO, it does take a little bit longer because I think it has to bake an ambient occlusion pass before it can do what it's going to do. So it's seemingly frozen here. This is a quote-unquote feature in Zbrush where it appears to be frozen, and then even if you tap and try to click on the program, you'll notice it doesn't respond, and it'll say it's frozen. Often this will come back as it did. I don't know if it did mask just the top here, but that was probably a problem because I was at almost 4 million polys. So I'll lower that a little bit. I'm going to turn up the inclusion intensity and mask again. See, it's getting the hands. It's not really getting quite the shapes that I want, so let's try it with mask by cavity. I'll go up one more. Subdivision level, mask by cavity. You see, that's a much more quick but also defined shape. Go up one more subdivision level, mask by cavity again. Invert, hide that mask. That means if I wanted to, I could quickly fill object and do something like this, which I think creates, for this character, some interesting shapes. Not necessarily all of them that I want, but I think it has potential. So I'm going to come in here, color pick this, Go a little less saturated and darker. And then now try that color fill object so that it feels more like a patina or a crevice in that color than it does something different, if that makes any sense. You like the face? Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm kind of happy with it. I don't know what is happening here. That's terrifying. It looks like there's some polygons that are using the flat material, so I'm going to have to fix that. I kind of like how this is, so I'm going to leave it for now. I could have also, before I do this, I'll undo, show you the mask. I can blur the mask. The problem with this is you see how blurred that gets. So if I come in here and do that color fill object, it actually looks okay. Maybe tighten the mask again. Let's try some things. Let's do that mask by cavity again. Invert, hide, color, fill object. Maybe we'll go even a little bit darker, a little more desaturated in gray. Fill. So we're kind of getting a little bit of something there. Color pick that. Maybe too far off last time. So we can get some fast color. And I think this is starting to look kind of interesting. Is it what I want to be the end goal? No, it's not. But it's not crazy far off, I don't think. And at the end of the day, I have a hotkey. For me, it's H. If I hit H, it will turn off all my poly paint, which is what this is. And I can go back to the original sculpt immediately. So I don't rely on the color all the time. It is something that I will kind of come back to time and time again. Now, I did lose when I did that black, so I'm going to have to come in here and paint some of this up again. That's fine. The thing about texture and color and all that stuff is it's layers. It's all about doing it layer after layer after layer. The first color you put down, the first stroke you put down is going to look bad. It's going to look weird. It's going to look like the first mark you make on a piece of paper with a ballpoint pen. It's just what it's going to look like. You know, there's no real way around that. But as you imagine cross-hatching an image and making your first line on a piece of paper, what will that look like? It's probably going to look kind of bad. It's going to look like you don't know where you're going, but over time, it kind of figures itself out on painting with a matte cap. Let's go back to RGB. I'm just going to paint away, turn down my RGB intensity here. Paint away some of those large lines. Trying to draw focus to certain parts of the body. And even though this isn't necessarily hardcore design work and we're not necessarily pushing the design at the moment, it is allowing me to know where areas of focus will be, should be, and kind of just like in the recap video that I played, let me know some options that I'll have for myself. Get back into that black. I think we'll probably put some like heavy black in here. Maybe we'll come in here. Let's get some, this is just a white, so I can come in here pretty quick. Get like a black rim around these eyes. I did circular eyes in the last character, so again, to kind of call it back, we'll do the same here. We'll try this. I don't know if this will work as well as I want it to, but we'll do an alpha, drag dot. Yeah, that kind of works. You have one theory, you're maybe wrong. What's your theory about? All right. So what I need to define is probably what this object is, what this character is made out of. Kind of like these being darker. That's interesting. But I want it to have a lighter. One thing I need to consciously be conscious of with this character is that I want them to feel welcoming. Right. So if welcoming and friendly specifically. So if I make this big, looming, aggressive character that's intended to be the caregiver of a group of people or peoples, it's going to kind of fight that. You know, it's going to feel like an aggressive thing, and that's not what I want. So I'm trying to be conscious of that. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to add some gradients. Something that can help ground a character or make them feel like they are part of the world, is adding a gradient from bottom to top. So I'm going to do that. Now notice that I'm kind of struggling to find what that color will be. What could be a nice complement to this orange? We could go a blue. Let's see what this would look like. You'll see this a lot in games. Typically what will happen in a game is it'll go dark to light. If you look at things like MOBAs, League of Legends, or Dota, especially Dota, there will be a genuine gradient from dark to light on the top, and that's because the characters are often shown like this. So that means, if I darken the bottom and lighten the top, right, you can see how it's easier to see the top of the character as if it's one color. So that's kind of a thing that you can experiment with. I like this blue, this really dark kind of navy blue, so I'm going to see maybe if that becomes my accent color for this character, and I'll bring it in. Starting at the bottom, I have a very low RGB intensity. And maybe I'll bring in a stripe or two of it in the top. I'm not really liking this white pad that I created, so we could try replacing that. That feels pretty intense. So that will probably just be painted this color. Drawing is like knowing where you're going and aiming for that, and painting is like finding your way and seeing where it goes. Sometimes you can explore while you're sketching and drawing, so there's definitely, I could see the argument there. And I could say sometimes painting you're exploring as well. But in this mode, I can agree with that. How's my New Year's? It was great. Pretty chill. I had some family in town, but we got to hang out and have a good time. Thank you for asking. Kind of liking this big shape that I just created. So I'll save this as a new version, and we'll load up the previous version and see if I had any paint information there. Yeah, okay. So just to give you the quick rundown of where we are and where we were. At the end of last stream, we were basically here. Actually, not even here. At the beginning of the stream, we were here. Then we have this one and this one. So now you can kind of see where that gradient is coming in. It's adding a nice focus. I also actually kind of like the white in these moons. And this is just with the base beginning of color. So for those who are saying, you know, color is difficult, it is difficult, but it takes time. You know, we've spent almost an hour on this character so far, mostly just painting. And you can see how that is kind of dialing it in, and it is a layer, right? The layer of the orange, the layer of figuring out where this is, the 1, 2s, and 3s of the contrast, the gradient that's going on top, the accent color, the finding the other things there that are going to help pop, right? All that stuff is pretty helpful. I actually do like this feeling darker. I don't know if I want it to be that blue, because blue obviously tends to mean water. I don't want this to feel like it's water, so I'm going to show you a little trick that I often do. Zbrush isn't great at storing a palette or having a lot of different colors. But what it can do, I'll show you a little trick, is just select an object that you aren't going to fill for some reason. Go to the bottom of its foot or somewhere where you don't often look, and just paint that color at 100% intensity. And then paint the other colors that you want to keep there. And that way, you have them. So this is basically my palette of colors that I have already used on this character. Now I can clear all the colors. I can choose other colors. So now I can come in here. I'm going to choose this blue. Even though the blue is not necessarily the color that I want it to be. But within this, I know that I like the value of it, the darkness of it. So what I want to do is I'm actually within the color wheel, instead of moving the value or the hue, or sorry, the saturation, this is saturation and this is value, I'm just going to move the hue. So I can move the hue and I'm going to make it a bit more of a green, more of a foresty green. I like that. I'm going to do color on this, fill object. Now, it didn't do the outside, so I realized, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm going to just fill the whole, I'm going to try this real quick. I'm going to fill the whole object. Then I'm going to mask the object. I actually like how the outside of it was a little bit darker. So I'm going to color pick that. It does change based on the masking, invert it, and then color fill object. So now that my base has a little bit of a gradient to the edge of it. And then we'll color pick this, and maybe we'll take a little bit brighter, a little bit more saturated, and we'll just, I don't know, pick some of these highlights. This is not super important for the actual sculpting element of this, the design element really at all, but if you're starting to visualize and you want to kind of see where it's going to be going, this can be helpful. Let's make these white officially. I like that being white. I like this being white as well, so let's color that. Color, fill object. So very quickly, we can get a base color for this character. We still have that little palette on the bottom, right? And now you can see this is where we started with no color, and this is where we have color. Still a lot to do as far as the model, as far as the texture, as far as the color, but I find that getting this little bit of information of color can really help you in the modeling side. It doesn't seem like it would. It feels like, you know, the traditional pipeline of making a character is you do the concept art and then you model it and then you texture it, right? But part of color and part of texturing is knowing what the materials are going to be. And so for me, this is a really good way to discover what the materials are going to be and know where those materials will be. What I mean by that is, what is this tannish orangish material? Is it a rock? Is it a metal? Is it a ivory, right? What is this whiter part? What is this darker part, right? What is all of that stuff? And it's easier to sculpt that for me if I know what it is. Or at least to say, you know what, this is a softer part, this is a rougher part, or, you know, it's just a bit of a way to get there. A little faster, a little easier. Dialing back some of these lines in the chest. Not a huge fan of them, so I'm just kind of coming in here with a lighter touch to dissolve them. Not every line needs to have, you know, an intense texture behind it. Not saying to have no texture, but I don't think you need to outline every single one of your sculpt's lines. That's the danger of using just a fill all when you do mask by cavity. You see, I made a TikTok. I did make a TikTok. I made a TikTok. I posted my first TikTok. I also put it on my Instagram. It has some recaps of the creator. So on TikTok, I added a creator recap video yesterday. But I put a link in my bio in Instagram. So if you're interested in that, if you're interested in my TikTok or watching those videos, I'll be posting them on Instagram and TikTok. I accidentally posted it to Instagram, not realizing that it cut off my video, so I had to repost it on Instagram, which is kind of annoying, but is what it is. TikTok's video editing platform is amazing, though. Like how quickly and easily you can edit and make a video and add sound and do all that stuff. It's actually really cool. It's really fast. It's pretty intuitive. You know, I've done a lot of tutorials and workshops and DVDs, and making videos can be a huge pain. And it is not on TikTok, which is nice. Mikhail from Facebook, hello, welcome to the stream. All right, I'm feeling good in this direction. I'm going to save one more time because I'm getting paranoid. We are about halfway into the stream. And I think I'm just going to start diving into actual alpha maps next. I'm going to do a little evaluation. I think I need more color first off in the lower parts. Often what I'll do is I'll just do exactly this. So if I'm going to take a break, which I'll probably take a very quick break in a second, I'll do a quick screenshot. You can hit Shift S in Zbrush and it will create a snapshot of what you're looking at. And I'll basically just sit like I'm doing right now and look at it and say, what do I like? What do I not like? Sometimes I'll take this into Photoshop and I'll paint over it to help me push that a little bit further, to help it look a little bit better. What areas are sticking out that I don't like, what are working. And so I'm going to do that while we take this quick break. So I'm going to play a quick video. We'll play a short film. We only have two options. We did Alex's last time, so we'll do mine this time. So we'll be back in like 3 minutes, everybody. Hang tight. Oh, hi everybody. Welcome back. While we were all watching that, I decided I'd take this into Photoshop and do a very fast paint over. So, 2391, yes. So I'm just doing a fast paint over on the edge of this in Photoshop. So you can see I'm just using kind of a rough brush and exploring. And what I'm kind of looking for in this is I feel like the design is good. I feel like it's working, but I feel like it's missing some of the scale and some of that initial golem vibe that I'm wanting. And what I'm noticing is I think it's just that the lines are so clean, the surfaces are so clean, and so I need to give it a bit of texture. And so with this quick a brush that basically looks like this, make it a little bigger so you can see. Sort of a chalky style brush, just color picking from the object, so holding down Alt. Right, so if I want to get some white, I'll color pick the Alt. If I want to get this orange, I'll color pick that. Just taking exactly from the object. I'm going to put a little bit of this texture on it and just kind of see how it works. If it looks great, cool. If it looks bad, no worries. It's in Photoshop. It took me 5 seconds, and I can erase it. So I think there is a certain thing about the silhouette popping a little bit. I think it helps it feel more natural and feel more organic. That alone, I think, will do quite a bit. There's already so many design lines on the character that I am not sure. I'm not sure I need to add more. I don't think I need to add more detail. I'm not sure I need to add more design to the character. I think it's really just about finalizing and refining what is there. So let's do that. Let's just add some detail. So that's a process I'll do quite a bit. It's always a good thing. It's always a good thing that I recommend to just take a break. There's no harm in taking a break. Everybody takes breaks. I know many painters, many illustrators, many artists who probably only produce artwork for about 4 to 6 hours a day, meaning they're actively working for 4 to 6 hours a day. But those other hours are them evaluating, looking at it, finding reference. I'm just going to import some alphas here. They're finding other ways to be creative and sort of recharging their brain, basically, and that creative eye, because you can only look at something for so long before it really just feels like you're staring at a blank wall and you've completely lost sight of what it was intending to be. Let's see. Here's some ones from the old Gnomon collection. I'll import these. These are all skulls. Happy New Year, AJ. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you, Rick. I appreciate that. She Was Lost Art. Beautiful. The compositions and the color were great. Thank you very much. I'd never made a short film, so it was a fun thing to do. It was cool. Let's import some more alphas here. I have a bunch of metal alphas. I don't really know what those are. They look kind of grungy, and that might add some nice texture to this, so we're going to keep playing with that. I wish that the preview, it just shows you Photoshop, or yeah, Photoshop dots. Let's get stone. Let's get all these. So I'm just importing all these alphas, and I'm going to go to my standard brush, and I'm going to go to my drag rectangle. Right now I'm on one of the highest subdivision levels, and we'll just do some tests. Ooh. We are currently painting, not sculpting, that's why. There we go. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to try something. I'm going to make a morph target. So morph target, store morph target. You could do this as a layer as well, but layers will drastically increase the size of your file. So I'm making a morph target. I'm going to drag this on. I'm not going to use the shapes that are here, but I'll show you an example of how you can use this. So let's say I drag on these really big rocks and I say, you know what, I really like this line. I want it to only be one of the panels, which is what I'm considering. So I'm going to go into my morph brush, which is the one that just looks like a sphere. And this will basically do a camera A, camera B between the two morphs. So now I can push back to the original sculpt, basically. So if I want to say, you know what I liked, I'm going to turn down the intensity a little bit of this. I like the texture. But I don't like it here like at all. I'll turn the intensity up. I don't like it here at all. I like it on this pattern, on this pauldron. This is more of an example because I don't think I'll keep this, but we might use it as a starting point. So you can see how I can kind of dial in some subtle texture by going in with a really heavy, heavy hand and then bringing it back with a morph brush. So I use the stones. There's some scales in here. This is interesting. This is not high enough resolution to do this. I have been thinking I'm going to have to cut this model up, and to do the amount of detail that I want, I might need to. But you can kind of see where if, like, let's dial this intensity back to 10. 14. So I could get an interesting texture on something. I could go back then to my morph brush. It requires a morph target. What? Did it delete the morph target? Oh, I'm on the highest. Gotta go down one. Yeah, I need to be careful of that. I did it on the highest, drag the alpha out on the highest level. Which is where I should have put the morph target, to be fair. So an easy way to basically isolate textures or create textures that are just going to go in one place on the model, or to be able to almost art direct them in their own way. Like if I was happy with this, I could come in here and I could say morph target delete, store again, and basically set a new state, in which is the neutral state that I can use the morph brush and go back to. So yeah, I'm going to undo all this because I don't need this. That was more of a explanation as to what I'll be doing. All right, so let's delete our morph target. Let's go up to the highest resolution, which is 15 million. I do think I'm going to have to separate this model, meaning this is 15 million polygons, but I can't even draw out, you know, a pattern on the shoulder. The reason is because the polygon size, if you've ever run into this issue, the reason is because the polygon size of something like this as compared to the polygon size of something in the head is much bigger versus much smaller. That means there's more detail here, meaning I could probably go to 15 million and draw out this alpha here, and you see how crisp that's going to be, right? Whereas I come over here and I'm going to do the same thing, and you see how not crisp it is. So I'm going to undo all that again. There we go. So that means I'm probably going to have to break the model up, or I need to find a way to retopologize it so that they're all roughly the same size. That isn't really going to be feasible for me right now, so I'm going to have to break it up later. Don't forget to save. I saved just before we did all this, so I'm okay. Thank you, though. Always appreciate the reminders. So let's go to the 15 mil. Store that morph target. Now we can save just so we have the morph target saved. Always save in iterations. So going up from 1. Many iterations. It seems to be helpful. All right, let's find some texture we want. Sand. This is interesting. I'm just going to play around with some of these. It's kind of cool. Also playing with inverting them. And this is kind of going back to that, you know, I'm afraid of color thing that we were talking about earlier. That's okay. This is an equal thing for me that used to be a big struggle, was the alphas. So, you know, the first time you draw out an alpha, almost always, it never really looks that good. And also just slapping them on there fast. Like sometimes you'll see people in videos slapping them on there fast in like a time lapse. Take the time to place it for real. Like actually place it. And I think that you'll find like, oh, that, you know, I'm going to get the right alpha that's going to go in the right direction. It's the right size. And that will help me, or will help the design or the alpha feel like it fits. One of the best things you can do, I heard this advice recently and I don't remember who said it, but one of the best things you can do for your speed is to slow down. The way to make something better, the way to make something faster is not your speed, it's not your actual physical speed. There's obviously an element of that, but it's not making mistakes. The way you don't make mistakes is you slow down. Kind of like this sand dune texture, especially for the size of what the character will be, and that there will be some of this little element to it. I am going to probably put a little bit more of that, like we had done in here. I need something that's going to help me break the surface of it, but I do like this overall texture, so it's something I'm going to run with, probably on the whole character, honestly. It kind of also gives it that organic yet structured element. And it might only go on certain parts. How do I organize my assets? Good question. Do I have my alpha saved in Lightbox or separately on a hard drive? I have them saved separately on a hard drive, and I have that hard drive set up or linked to a Dropbox account. And that way, wherever I go, whatever program I'm needing or whatever, you know, obviously I don't travel around. We all don't. But if I'm working at a different workstation, I can just download them from Dropbox. This is starting to work for me. Now, the middle is always difficult because you don't want to have symmetry. You don't want to lose symmetry on something too early. But if you bring it in early, you get these really weird patterns. So I try to avoid using symmetry on the middle alpha placements, even though it does mean you'll have to come in and sculpt something twice. But I always just take the minute to recognize that you're not sculpting this by hand. And if you were sculpting it by hand, you would have to sculpt it twice with no undos. So don't fret. You can link a hard drive to a Dropbox account. I don't know. I don't have the hard drive. Sorry, I don't have the hard drive linked to a Dropbox account. But I guess I was saying I have it on like a separate drive, which is my Dropbox. And it is on a separate hard drive that the Dropbox is going to, not like an external drive. Now what this does, and we'll just like zoom in on one area, all of these little details have created some really interesting patterns and shapes. And so now I can take an existing line or something that I had and use that sort of as like inspiration to continue or to keep a line going. So you can kind of get some nice things going in there. I'll do that a lot later. All right, let's find a little bit more of a... I'm happy with this, so I'm going to come in here. I'm at my highest level, delete my morph target, store another morph target, and we'll try to find some more maps that look cool. I'm also going to turn them up a little bit this time. This is definitely something I think I should probably add, especially for the scale of the character. So we'll do it really large. But now when you see a huge character with a couple like large cracks in it, we'll just do one that's asymmetrical to make it a little more clear. Right? It gives it that scale that I think the character needs. That's an interesting idea, Esteban, saying that they're supposed to be humongous as well as a caregiver. It would be cool to have some small people, quite cave dwellings on them that could help break up the silhouette a little bit. Yeah, I like that idea. That's interesting. I know I definitely want to have like some little things like on the ground. Like we'll just make like a... It's not really going the way that I wanted, but that was supposed to be a dome. Maybe you can see it kind of transitioned the way it started going. There's not enough resolution there, but like some little huts and domes and stuff on the ground. I think this dune texture is definitely adding like a cool leathery texture, which I'm digging. So let's keep moving. I don't like this big cracks. I don't like Crocs either. My son loves Crocs though. Let's see. More alphas. I'm not liking these skull ones that I imported. We'll try this one here. Interesting, but not necessarily. Something you also need to be aware of, like, is look at the edge of how big the shape is changing. Like right here's where my cursor was, and you'll see how far it actually moved. That's something I want to be aware of. I also don't necessarily want to obliterate that texture that I put on there. It will probably go away, which is fine. I could also do some foliage or some fiber mesh or something on it. That could be something we could explore. Thinking about it, jumping into fiber mesh at the moment to explore that. Let's keep doing these textures though. Part of it, oh, that's a cool one. Part of it is I know that I'm going to need to break the model apart. So for me to come in and do all this work right now isn't fruitless, but it's not going to benefit me in the way that I totally want it to right now. So I'm going to have to kind of find a way to approach it slightly differently. I also need to figure out where those separations in the silhouette are going to come from. Right now it's all roughly the same height. So that's what I'm doing right here is I'm going to create basically like a chasm in this thing. And again, this is 15 million polygons, so you can see how quickly it is. Basically, it's running out of geometry. And this is why I'll have to break the arms off at the very minimum. But that means I also need to find a good place to break the arms, and this is a good way to do that. Because it's not all, I don't see this necessarily as skin. That means there's going to be some way that it's manufactured or created, or the way that it moves. So I'm going to find a way to make it something I can separate. We got about 40 minutes left in the stream today. See, like now I know roughly where this is going to go. So kind of around that line, it'll go in here. Just trying to create a very clear separation point for the future. Something that makes sense. You kind of go back and forth and see the little details we're adding. All that little subtle movement is from the texture itself. It sort of deflated the object. So this is where we started. This is where we are. There is something about this head shape that I kind of like more, where it's like the neck is more defined or less defined. I've definitely created a real neck on the character, so that's something I might adjust right now. This is part of why I often have both old files and new files in the same file together. Some of that is this line that I sculpted in, so I'm going to have to correct that if I want to truly separate it. And then also making sure that the shape works in multiple angles is really, really important. So I know I can get it from the front, but as soon as I got it from the front, it didn't look good from the side. Doesn't look good from the back. Do you have any models that you have animated? I don't do too much animation myself. And a lot of the work that I did professionally was visual development work when I was working at Marvel. More stuff if you want to see animated is mostly from games, so Star Citizen or Uncharted 3. I have more animated stuff in those. Yeah, I like that more. I was kind of starting to lose. One of the things we did in the first streams was kind of give it a power lifter vibe. And I'm liking this more than this. Cool. All right, now we'll save again. Yeah. All right. We were doing texture. Have you ever thought about teaching classes more at normal? At normal what? At Gnomon? At Gnomon. Currently, I only teach the one class, which is Overview of Visual Effects and Games. And I've thought about it. Yeah, it's definitely something I've been entertaining. No plans right now, though. This is where you get into the really nit-gritty stuff of like there's certain lines and shapes, and we're not even close to what the final is going to be like. So still got about three more weeks, and I'm going to do more work off of stream on this and all that stuff. So a lot to do, but it's coming along. I'm really enjoying this one. I think it's be cool. The challenge, as compared to what the one we did last time, where there was no environment at all, I'm gonna have to figure out how to make this environment. So that will be a separate challenge. Now the profile of this head is pretty bad. Seeing if I just bring it forward to make it kind of more even with the body, if that really affects it. Definitely makes the head feel smaller when it's this way, which is was the initial goal. I'm wondering if I can just shrink the head this way. I think that works better anyways. Just basically move the whole head forward. Yeah, that's great. Cool. Okay. What else, everybody? Let's do more texture. We got to get that texture out, like I was saying. I'd love to take a look dev, character dev class taught by me. Yeah, the types of classes I've explored teaching have been all character development focused. So if anything happens, it will probably be along those types of lines. This is kind of the texture that I was imagining when I was doing the paint over. Something that would help break the silhouette quite a bit. It feels massive. Thank you. That's the goal. So I'm glad that they're starting to feel big. I'll try masking this off. I'm also going to come in here, delete the morph target, store the morph target. We could always bring back in other parts of the texture, so I could come back in with that dune leathery texture later. It may also be an underlying texture. But let's just do this like once. We'll do it once. We'll do it asymmetrically. We'll do one here, and we'll do one, like, trying to get it in the right spot. The exact same. It's pretty close, isn't it? That line keeps appearing exactly where I don't want it to, but this is fine. So if I were to do that and then go in and do my morph brush on like this, just kind of playing around with an idea right now. And then my paint over, I was suggesting that there's like a divot in between some of these. Oh, looks like there was a glitch in the stream, everybody. Sorry about that. Seems to happen once a stream, almost always about 90 minutes in. I don't know what that is. So if we were to do that, and then let's try it again with a mask. It's kind of just exploratory here. I don't think that I'm going to end up sculpting in this texture, but we'll see. We'll use symmetry on this one for now. We'll do inverse. We'll inset it. So I think if I do something like this, it's obviously gotten rid of a lot of that leathery texture, which is cool and I like it. But it is starting to overtake the design lines that are there. That's a challenge with texture in general, though. But if we let's just do it really big and see. So this as compared to, load up the same save. So this as compared to this is getting some of that difference in the silhouette, which I want. Adding some of that texture, which I think is helpful. And we can still have that underlying texture. It almost feels like it needs, like each of these should be made out of like a granite, like a big chunk of something, like a big rock. Because I like the texture, I just don't like what I've actually done, if that makes sense. So I like the idea. So we're going to run with the texture. I know now what I need to do. I basically need to chop the model apart, get it so it can be higher res enough to be individually textured, to where it's not going to be, you know, if I zoomed in on a piece, this is, again, this model is 15 million polygons, and that's the most detail I can get in here. So I need to go in here, take it apart, multiple pieces, and honestly it might be best for me to attempt texturing, or at least doing a base level of texturing in another program that's like a quixel. That might be good for me to make it feel like a rock. Like if I'm going to get rock, make this sort of feel like rocks or something like that, or it's cliffs, and it's got all this cool texture and cool color. I might actually just try to do that all in quixel. So let's get it set up for that. I got a question from YouTube. I got to undo a bunch of these. In a model where there are really close areas, like the legs of a character, if you go for Dynamesh, they might merge or create a junction. How do you avoid this? You avoid it by not letting those areas get closer, or you need to turn up your... Did I get everything? not entirely. You either need to move those areas apart so they don't merge, or you need to turn up your Dynamesh resolution. There's no other way around it. Unfortunately. Oops. But I know exactly what you're saying. Like right now, if I were to Dynamesh this, all the whole legs down here would completely be merged into one object, whereas they are not right now, meaning I could turn off symmetry and, you know, pose one if I wanted to. All right, let's chop this apart. It is symmetrical, so I probably only need to do one side, which is good. I'm going to start on the shoulders and go from there. What I'm going to do is just work on this. I'm going to duplicate the object. The reason I'm duplicating it in my Subtool palette is so that I have it there in case I delete something. Just generally, it's kind of a precautionary backup. I'm going to go to the highest resolution because that's what I need to outline this. And I am going to delete lower. Why am I delete lowering? Well, I'll do that in a second. I'll show you why. First, I'm going to use the benefits of the delete lower to mask what I need. And we're going to go over, just a little bit over where we want it to go. Trying to keep the mask not blurred. So mask off. I know that I want this entire arm. I can now hit Control W will mask that into its own polygroup. Now here's the reason that I'm going to delete the lower subdivision levels. If I go up, you'll notice that the division that was created in the polygroup will stay. But as I go down, it no longer can go any further, so it's going to have to change the line where the polygroup is created. You see it's actually changing all the way up here and up here. What happens, and it will look fine right now, right? But notice that those little jagged pieces are gone now. It's actually deleted. It's changed the polygroup in here as well. So if I hadn't deleted, or if I don't delete these lower polygon divisions, I'm going to undo so you can see how it was different before. And I do a split, or I do some function that separates this from this. It's going to choose the lowest subdivision and the division that it's going to create there when it separates it, and I would have a big chunk out of the model that I'm wanting to keep, which is very, very annoying. Esteban's saying you could separate them as a separate subtools and use the new Dynamesh picker to Dynamesh them individually, then with the same resolution as separate. That's cool. All right, so I was here. I'm going to go to my highest res. I hit invert that, Control W. I'm going to change it to another color just because I can. I actually want to add this. Make sure we're all good. We're all good. Control W again. Delete lower resolution. So now I have this. And I'm going to do this. And I'm going to mask this as its own item. I'm actually going to do one adjustment here. I'm going to probably separate the head. Where? I'm not entirely sure. But I know it needs to be separated. Feels like this is a good division point. Probably somewhere around like here. So I'll find some way in the design to hide that. This is really common in characters. If you've ever seen a character, which you certainly have, in a movie or a game that is CG, and there's some form of a division, there's something on the head that separates the head from the rest of the body. A t-shirt, right? Clothes. If there's somebody who's not wearing a ton of clothes, maybe they have a scarf or something like that, like Nathan Drake. Those types of characters. This is a way to break it up. I'll go a little bit over what I need. We'll figure that out in a minute as far as how this is actually going to dial in there, but we'll figure it out. I'm going to mask that. I'm going to hide that now. I'm probably going to keep this piece as it is. So I have this and I have this. I'm just going to change the color. If you just hit Control W, it will change the color to something separate. And I'm going to keep this, I'm going to keep this, and I'm probably going to use the existing mesh we already had to do the body. Because I think it's fine. Let me see. There's definitely more in this area than I'd want there to be. So maybe we'll adjust it later, but right now we'll stick with the head and the arms as their own thing. So I'm going to come back into the mesh that I was working on. I'm going to do a split, and I'm just going to do a groups split. What that does, it takes each different color and makes it its own polygroup, or sorry, poly subtool. And this is the body that's very high res. I don't think I need this, so I'm just going to hit Control down. I'm going to put that at the bottom of my list in my subtools and turn off the eyeball so it's not visible. You can use the up and down arrow keys to go through all your subtools, in case you didn't know that. And now I have this piece. This is what I want. Now I'm going to keep this here. I'm going to go and I'm going to duplicate this yet again. And I'm going to go into our Zremesh button. We'll say target polygon count 10. And we'll just hit Zremesh and see how this does. There is quite a bit of polygons here, so it's going to take a minute to do this because, again, it is around 15 million polys, or it was. This piece is about 4 million. I don't want to dynamesh it because that will fill the underside a bit. I don't want this to have an underside. I could obviously get rid of that in another way or create a new polygroup for that, but I want to see what the Zremesh does by its default. Apparently it decided that it needed to autosave at the same point, which is frustrating. But there we go. Then we get a nicer mesh. Obviously there's some issues here on the edges that I'm not a fan of, but we're not going to be looking. Oh wow, the back has some troubles. We'll smooth all that out. Let's see, mask. We're gonna mask our border. I did not expect it to look like that. But now we have about a 29 poly, 1000 poly mesh, which with nicer geometry. There's definitely some things I could do to clean this up, but I'm going to basically be hiding all this. And there's some other poly groups here, so I'm just going to delete hidden geometry. And now I have this one, which is nice topology. And then I have another one right above it, which is going to be the sculpted geometry. So 3.7 million polygons and 29,000 polygons. This is going to be way easier to UV to do a bunch of different things with. So this is one we're going to be working with. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here. Before I do anything, I'm going to UV this. Really simple. I'm going to save, by the way, just because we're duplicating and doing a bunch of things. You can see how the file size exponentially grows. We're going to go over here. We're going to go Z plugin. We're going to go to our UV master. And we're going to just hit unwrap. Because there's no subdivision levels yet, it's not going to have any issues with this. And you'll see that now this is what it looks like as a flattened mesh. That's actually pretty solid. I feel okay about that, so I'm going to unflatten that. What if I mask this and unflatten that? So I know that that was the front, basically. This is the face. And I think this is going to be the neck. Yeah. So Definitely something weird going on there, though. Why is it not catching all of these lines in between and like doing little things on the face? Let's try unwrap again. Very odd that it's doing that. But we have a UV for now. We can always go and UV it separately if we need to. I'm going to add some subdivision levels to this one too. I'm going to get it to about 1.5 million. That's because it's close to what this had. So I have the good one right now selected. The old one is here as well. They're both visible. And I'm going to go to project all. This is going to take a minute. You see a little bar going up top. But now you see it's basically snapped to it. The thing you might note, let's see if anything shot off into the ether. Did not. It looks okay. So now we have the 1.8 million poly mesh here. And we have the 3 million poly mesh. The only difference is that the edge is a little cleaner on the older one. That's fine. We don't really need that. Downsides is we didn't get our poly paint. So I'm messed up there. All you have to do is turn poly paint on both of them. Hit project all again. And that should do it. So now, visually, we have this one and we have this one. This one does have some bits shooting off. You can always smooth it off, or we'll fix those later. But now we have a nicely separated headpiece that has more or less the exact same sculpt and texture. And we can come in here and I'll just delete the old one. Alright, so now we're going to add to that the arms. Now the arms don't really need to have both of them at the same time. You can duplicate them over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate, but I'm going to go to each of these individually, and I'm going to hide one side. We'll hide this side. And I'm actually going to go in here, and I'm going to delete hidden on both of those. They look exactly the same, so you can't really see that anything's happening here. We're going to go to this one. I'm going to do my Zremesh on this. We'll choose 10 again. This is about 2.5 million poly, so it's going to take a little bit of time. We've done a little bit of work here, so I'm actually going to save this. I like to save after every step just in case. Sometimes Zbrush will crash when it goes through these operations, which sucks, but if you save right before you do them, there's no real harm. So let's do that Zremesh. I do have about 10 minutes left in the stream, so for anybody who's joining, welcome to the stream. We're about to wrap up here. We're working on our archetype character number 2, the Caregiver. If you have any questions about what I'm working on, please feel free to ask. There is a recap video that I showed at the beginning of this, so the stream that you're watching now will be available on YouTube or Twitch probably within the hour after the stream ends. I did show the recap video on my Instagram, so if you want to follow me on Instagram or go check that out there and not wait for the video to process, you can head over there and see basically how we got to the point where we are now and what we're working on. This looks pretty good, all except for this hideous thing in the back. I'll just smooth that out. Great. Let's do that unwrap since we're here. Let's flatten that. Not bad, but not terrible. Smoothing all this out. Unflatten. Great. Add some subdivision levels. I'll make it about 1.25 million. I'll show this one now. So we have this one with all the texture, and we have this one with no texture and nice topology. So good topology, bad topology. Selecting the one with good. Also having RGB on this time. And I'm going to hit project all. Make sure you have your color here on the right. Make sure that's on. Otherwise, you will not get your RGB. I also realized that you won't get your RGB on if the color's not on. So you got to do that too. I think I selected the wrong one. Alright, that one. Good. What did I say the best way to be faster is? Slow down. There we go. So hiding the other one. This is our new one. It should look very similar, if not identical, to the old one. Each arm is going to be about 2.5 million polys. Now that's about what we had before, but just to give you an example, this was the smallest polygon here, and this, here we go, we can get to 4 million. So you probably get a little bit more detail in this arm now. It's also a separate entity, but you can basically see that like the size of the polygons here are more even across the arm. So I'll be able to get better, more consistent texturing or size. This is a dumb question, but does the poly paint get projected onto the unwrapped UVs when you do that? It's on the mesh, so in a way, yes. What I could do is come over here, go to a higher subdivision level, and go to texture map and say create a texture from poly paint. And if I hit that, what you'll notice is it will take a second, but now we have a texture that is exportable to any other program that has the poly paint. So when I did the projection onto the mesh, it brings along the color as well. But you have to make sure, that you get the color, you have to do a couple things. First, you have to make sure that color in the project settings is on, and then you need to make sure that the actual objects that you're looking at have their textures on as well. Otherwise, it doesn't know what it's projecting from. So that's how that's done. All right, now we have that. I'm going to delete this one because this is the one without the subdivision levels. Great. I'm going to show our character so far. You see I've broken up the head into one and the arm into one. Now what I can do is I can come in here and I can do my Z plugin. I like to use Subtool Master, Mirror, merge into one subtool. Of course, before I do any of those operations, like I said, be paranoid and save, just in case. There we go. So we use that Subtool Master Mirror, merge into one subtool. We're doing the arm right now. It's saying this is going to be 2,446,880 polygons. Okay, great. Part of what this should do as that function is it should bring the other subdivisions, so it does recreate subdiv levels for you, which is awesome. So now I have a mirrored set of arms, which are isolated. Now I also have this body that I was working on before, but the body isn't really needed because I don't need the head or arms in there. So I had the legs that I separated as well. Those are here too. This now has no subdivision levels though, which is a bit of an annoyance. It's not really a problem, it's just kind of annoying. But all I need to do is just come in here and do the same process. So let's just do it. Save again. Again, be paranoid when you're saving. Doesn't take that long. Much shorter than losing your work. And we'll do the Zremesh one more time. This one will almost certainly have problems here in between these legs right there. That's okay. I can always pose and adjust the character later when needed. So it's taking a little bit longer because the mesh that we're Zremeshing is about almost nearly 6 million polys. So some of this takes a little bit of time to just let the software process, but it obviously doesn't take forever. Of course, as I say that, I realized I forgot to duplicate this mesh. That's okay. We have the big bodied mesh up here. Oh boy, look at these polys up here. It's pretty disgusting. Always good to come in, smooth this stuff out. You can also come in here. I'm going to mask the border. Once it's done, sometimes you can also just run it a second time. It won't take nearly as long, or shouldn't, except I masked something, so it might be having issues with that. It shouldn't take as long, and you might get some of that cleaned up, so we'll give that a shot. Oh, there's an error, so that was a problem. That's okay. We'll run with it. If we need to adjust it later, we will. I don't like how big this is. So I'm just going to clean up some of that. Make it more neutral, basically. There's clearly some hole in the mesh there, but not super important. I can always fix that later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that unwrap just really quickly. It says it's cutting it into 65 steps. That seems like way too many. So what I'm going to do, isolate this. You see that there's some pieces that were floating. Zremesh and UV Master have trouble with those. So I'm going to isolate those, and I'm going to delete the hidden ones. Now let's try that unwrap. It's only 4 polygon islands instead of 64. So the reason it was taking so long was when it Z-remeshed, it splintered it into a million little pieces. Flatten it. That is a disgusting unwrap, but it is going to be fine for what we need it to be. Now I'm going to add some detail to this. We're going to put it at about 2 million polys. We're going to show what we need to show, which is the original mesh. We're going to bring that up to its highest subdivision level. We're going to hit our poly paint, so we have our poly paint available. So you see this is what we want to have our color, and at the detail of this, we're going to select it. We're going to scroll down, and we're going to create a morph target because I don't want this thing to get other parts. So morph target, store morph target, and then we're going to do that project all button. This shouldn't take too long, but we do have a bunch of really high res objects, so it might just take a minute to know exactly what it's going to do. There we go. And as soon as we're over, we'll bring up our stream very shortly, because it is almost noon. On my phone, it is noon. All right, so there we go. We have our nice mesh. There's obviously some issues here we need to fix. I'll fix those off stream. But generally, we took our body. It is now 3 different pieces. Obviously, some areas I need to correct here, but that's part of what happens when you break it into a bunch of meshes. And we started today basically here with no color. A little bit of the design worked out. Actually, it was more around here. Adding some texture, adding some color, pushing the design, figuring out what everything's going to be. And I feel like we have a pretty good roadmap for what we're going to be doing for the rest of the character. So I'm feeling confident that this is going to work out and it's going to look cool. And I'm liking this one. I'm enjoying this one actually more than the last one, which is good. So, all right, everybody, that is going to be it for the stream today. Feel free to follow along on Facebook, on Twitch. Thank you so much for following. Again, liking and subscribing, giving thumbs up to the videos that you watch is actually really helpful to us. So please do that if you don't mind. And again, we have a bunch of cool streams coming up this year. So I'm doing this stream every week, every Tuesday from 10 to noon. We have an 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. stream on Tuesdays. We have a Wednesday art jam. We have an upcoming stream this Friday, a really cool one with Miguel Ortega and Tran Ma creating a short film in Unreal Engine 5. They'll actually be creating a new short over the course of about 6 months, and you'll be able to see their weekly updates, which should be a really great stream that starts on Fridays, this Friday at 6 p.m. And we're going to have a really amazing event this Thursday on Mitchell's versus the Machines. We're going to have Miller Lord there. We're going to have Chris Miller and Phil Lord introducing the director of Mitchell's vs. the Machines, on our stream this Thursday at 7:30. So check out all that stuff, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you all very, very much, and I'll see you soon. Have a good one, everybody. Bye.